Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Let me say again how great it is to be able to be back with you. I'm still recovering from COVID, still have an awful lot of lethargy, an awful lot of really needing to sleep a lot. I just don't like to do that at all. My philosophy about naps is instead of napping, I could be doing something constructive, but it is what it is. Right now, and trying to recover from this COVID, about any time that I exert myself, for instance, just this morning, I went to storage and got several boxes of my books to move into my new office. By the way, I'll be posting on Facebook some pictures. My new office is basically finished. We're in the process of moving in now. Oh, what a deal. Pardon me. So anyway, anytime that I exert myself just a little bit, I mean, it just knocks me down. I have so very little energy, no stamina, seem like whatsoever. But I'm doing it in order to build up, in order to get my stamina back. So anyway, I must take this opportunity to say thank you so very, very much for so many wonderful expressions of concern over my health, some very helpful suggestions, and of course the many, many prayers that were offered on my behalf. I tell you, it's just been absolutely wonderful to read some of those. Many of those expressions of concern and prayers, even coming from people that with whom I disagree, and you disagree with me, but nonetheless, we set our differences aside, and for simple humanity and compassion and mercy and what have you, express concern and offer prayers on the behalf, in this case, of me. So I appreciate that so very, very much. Okay, I want to get right back into our examination. As I promised, and prior to coming down with COVID, I began to examine a couple of objections, a couple of key arguments that are made to avoid the fact that 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 is the coming of the Lord of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. And if Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following is in fact the same coming of the Lord of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, then 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 very, very, very clearly posits that coming of the Lord in the first century, in the lifetime of the Thessalonians. I shared with you how Steve Gregg, argument number one, said, well, Preston made a big deal about this in our formal public debate, which I think was in 2013. Well, I did. And Steve Gregg's answer at that time was far less than sufficient. Well, in his book that he has written, introduced in 2022, Why Not for Preterism, he has now given a, quote, fuller explanation that is just as insufficient as his debate argument. He says we have to understand that when Paul says, to those of you being troubled, he wasn't necessarily talking to the Thessalonians about what was happening in their day, in their city, in their lives. He was talking about Christians all throughout the history of Christianity. And when Paul said that the Lord Jesus would give them relief from that persecution and tribulation onto their persecutors, he wasn't promising the Thessalonians anything. He was just simply saying that one of these days, by and by, who knows when, the Lord will come and will give the reward to the faithful Christians who may have suffered for the cause of Christ. And point number 3, he argued, well, Preston argues that it was the Jews who were persecuting the Thessalonians, but he said, no, it was their fellow countrymen, as if the Jews of Thessalonica were not the fellow countrymen of the Thessalonican Christians. Very first time I heard that argument, I was like, oh, seriously? And Gregg offering that is not the first time I've heard it. But nonetheless, that was the very first argument that I examined back before COVID. Then, as I promised you yesterday, that I would examine and respond to another argument. This argument is offered by Sam Frost in his book, The Parousia. That book is available on Amazon. And if you want to read a book that is both confused and confusing, then buy yourself a copy of that book. And what you will find in that book is some of the most novel, some of the most unprecedented, quote, arguments that you will ever find. So what does Sam Frost say about 2 Thessalonians chapter 1? Now, keep in mind that Paul is writing to the Thessalonian church, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 1. So we know who he's writing to, right? He's not writing to the church in New York City or in some church in Indiana or Ardmore, Oklahoma. He's writing to the church at Thessalonica. Over and over again, he uses the present active indicative or the present participle to speak of the tribulation that they were then enduring, or the persecutions from pathemata, the Greek word. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no denying that the first century church of the at Thessalonica were being persecuted. There's also no doubt that it was the Jews who were the movers and the shakers of that persecution. Now, here's something you need to know. Every single Greek translation or every single English translation of the original Greek has this, something similar to this. It is a righteous thing with God to repay with tribulation. That's thalipsis. Thalipsis means pressure. Thalipsis is used 45 times in the New Testament, and unless the context determines otherwise, as I shared with you yesterday, it is persecution for the cause of Christ. So Paul says, it is a righteous thing with God to repay with tribulation, pressure. So those who were persecuting the Thessalonians, and that's the Jews, were going to be repaid with tribulation, pressure. And to you who are troubled, thalipsis, to those of you who literally are being troubled, rest, from the Greek word onesis, with us when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven. Now, every single English translation of the Greek that is listed as available on BibleGateway.com lists this as when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven. Now, let me back up just a little bit, all right? So we have thalipsis, pressure, and we have the word that is translated as rest or relief in many, many translations. And here's something you need to know. Thalipsis and onesis are antonyms with each other. Anytime, I have not found a single example otherwise, anytime that thalipsis is used with onesis and vice versa, onesis is invariably relief from whatever kind of pressure the subjects are under. Doesn't matter what it is. A woman in travail, the pressure of childbirth, when the child is born, she gets relief. Relief from the pain of childbirth. So, Paul is promising the Thessalonians of 2,000 years ago relief. By the way, the word anesis doesn't mean some kind of mental consolation. If you have a context in which the pressure is strictly mental pressure, psychological pressure, then one could imagine that anesis would be the relief from that psychological pressure. But in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, you have very real, very objective, very concrete actions of pressure, persecution. Paul promised the Thessalonians relief, not some mental consolation, but relief from that pressure. And when would that come? When would they be given that relief? Paul, well, here's something you need to know. Paul didn't say, look, brethren, look, hang on. You may die under the tribulation, under the pressure of persecution, but when the Lord comes, or when you die, you get to go to heaven. No. He didn't say, now look, brethren, you may die from this persecution, but guess what? You get to go to Abraham's bosom. No. Relief when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven. Now, like I said, every single English translation on Bible Gateway, which last time I counted was somewhere between 57 and 59 English translations. Every single one of them translated 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 as relief, rest, when the Lord Jesus is revealed. So, according to every single English translation, the Thessalonians would be given relief from that then ongoing pressure when the Lord Jesus would be revealed from heaven in flaming fire. Really, linguistically, grammatically, there's no denying this. And listen, all of these English translations were produced by men who are futurists. As I got into my Bible Logos program, and I just looked up translation or commentary after commentary after commentary, the huge majority of them, put this coming of the Lord at the end of time. Now, a few of them admitted that that's troublesome because it certainly seemed that Paul was promising those living, breathing human beings at Thessalonica relief from that persecution at the coming of the Lord in their lifetime. I mean, after all, if the translation rest with us, relief with us when the Lord Jesus is revealed, then that means the relief would not be given until the coming of the Lord. That means the Thessalonians would not receive relief from that then ongoing persecution until the coming of the Lord. But they would receive it when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven. You know what that means? That means that the Thessalonians had to be experiencing tribulation, thalipsis, when the Lord Jesus was revealed from heaven, because the Lord could not give them relief from that then ongoing persecution at his coming if they were not alive being persecuted when the Lord Jesus was revealed from heaven. You can't give them relief from persecution when you come if they're not under persecution when you come. It's just simply impossible. Okay, well, how does Sam Frost answer that? Well, I'm out of time. You knew that would happen, didn't you? So, tomorrow, on Wednesday, I will very carefully delineate and share with you Sam Frost's argument on 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. And let me say again, his argument is unprecedented in church history, cannot be found in any creed. I have not found it in any commentary, nothing even closely resembling it. Yet Sam Frost says he's in full accord with church history and scholarship, the church fathers, as he likes to call them, and the creeds. No, he is not. Unless he can produce, and I've challenged him. I have challenged Sam over and over and over again to give one scholarly citation, one historical citation of anyone in church history that has made the argument that he is making on 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. So you'll have to tune in tomorrow to know what his argument is. In the meantime, go to my website, donkpreston.com, order the book In Flaming Fire. It will help you tremendously to understand the power of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. So, I'll see you on the flip side.